The next US recession will not be caused by a health crisis like the 2020 recession, or the structural issues in the financial sector like the Great Recession, but rather by record high inflation. This is a big cause for concern for many countries around the world, especially those in Europe, as when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. The next recession is forecast to start in 2023, according to almost 70% of macroeconomists. This may be a lot sooner than some people were thinking. However, the average American is feeling the effects already in the last months. The first signs are already visible, as 58% of Americans believed that the US was already in a recession as of June 2022, according to The Economist and YouGov. The yield curve inversion of March 2022, which is one of the several indicators of a pending economic downturn, along with rapidly rising inflation, are the main warning signs for the next recession. As rising inflation usually leads to an increased cost of living, this reduces consumer demand for non-essential goods. For example, you would be much more willing to give up expenses on fancy dinners, jewelry, and some electronics if food and other essential goods are getting much more expensive and take up more of your monthly budget. This would make business in these sectors much harder, as the demand for these goods slows down throughout the recession. This inflation has been caused by supply shortages because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Russia-Ukraine war, and to some debated extent the stimulus packages in the US. One of the major shortages that was brought about by the pandemic was that of semiconductors, or chips. These are key components in computers, video game consoles, and cars today. This problem has been intensified with the political tension surrounding Taiwan, as it is one of the biggest manufacturers of semiconductors around the world. On top of this, the Russia-Ukraine war has caused one of the biggest impacts on higher prices for oil, gas, and foods like wheat and sunflower oil, which consequently made up goods and services much more expensive. This is because Ukraine and Russia are among the largest exporters of these raw materials around the world. In 2020, these two countries alone accounted for 27% of wheat traded worldwide. As these raw materials are essential for the initial parts of the supply chains like wheat, or key in all components of them like oil and gas. Europe has been especially impacted by the rising cost of gas in particular, and winter 2022 will be costly, as many countries rely on Russian gas as an energy source. Nevertheless, the largest US banks are prepared for the crisis. Having learned from the 2008 financial crisis and how some institutions were quick to completely collapse, the biggest banks in the US have prepared. One example of these institutions that collapsed is Lehman Brothers, one of the biggest investment banks before the crisis. Its end came about because it was utterly overwhelmed by securities that were tied to the housing bubble in the US. The CET1 ratio is a ratio that is used to determine if a bank has sufficient capital reserves to absorb losses and avoid insolvency. The higher the ratio is, the more liquidity the bank has that ensures it against major issues. Thus, if the bank's CET1 ratio is high, it means that it is well prepared for future crises. The stock market is a very good indicator of the current and future states of the economy, as when the stock market is doing well and growing, this shows that companies are in a good situation and will continue to do so. This then creates optimism amongst consumers, investors, and businesses. However, the market dips throughout 2020 are certainly an indicator that investors are unsure about the current and future situation of the economy. After the recovery from the COVID economic downturns and the stimulus packages to rescue the economy before it went into steep decline, the confidence among investors had not fully been restored, as these dips have pertained and have been especially worsened since the layoffs at many large tech firms like Meta, Twitter, Snap, and Netflix, among others. Overall, the general outlook for the future is that the general public will adjust their behavior to deal with the effects of this recession. This includes postponing large purchases like a car or a new house, and instead start saving more in order to be financially sound for the recession. The severity and the duration of the next recession will be highly dependent on the condition of the global economy, and even more so on the measures taken by the US government and its agencies, as this recession could potentially be worse for the US economy and the global one than that of the Great Recession in 2008 if not dealt with in the correct manner. Yet, lessons have been learned since 2008 and there is still time to minimize the effects it will have. This is up to policymakers and agencies to do so, whilst also preparing other markets like the European one to brace itself knowing all of this information. The likely solutions for the next recession will be to slow down inflation, stimulate economic growth, and reduce the cost of commodities such as oil, wheat, and timber, as these are crucial resources in many supply chains and can go on to affect the prices of many other goods and services. With this recession, as with others, there will be layoffs. Many people may choose to go back into education and venture into new career paths or gain more skills within their own. Online degrees have facilitated this greatly, and many people are taking them on part-time. Click on this video here to find out the untold truth behind online degrees that is not spoken about.